Hello, everybody. My name's Ray. Welcome to the Evangelical Dark Web. Today, we will be talking about the pastors and churches that took PPP loans as part of the Small Business Administration's lockdown relief efforts. So, this is public information and this is also public money, but this is also an ecclesiastical matter. And what I'm seeing is that many congregants do not know that their churches took PPP loans. And many deacons were not aware that their churches not only pursued these loans, but also received these loans. I know of this situation in person. I believe the lack of transparency that we're seeing in a lot of evangelical churches is unethical. And if it's not only unethical, but it may also be a violation of these churches' bylaws. So, I believe in transparency and accountability. And I'm not saying that it's inherently wrong for churches to pursue this money or faith-based organizations to pursue this money. But they should be doing it for the right reasons. They should have a necessity for it. And based on what I'm seeing from the data that I've compiled of these large churches is that they pursue this money very quickly. And maybe that's because a lot of these organizations, a lot of these mega churches are run like businesses. They're not really run like churches in the New Testament. So I've compiled a lot of data, and I want to go through that with you. These are the most famous pastors that took money from the Small Business Administration from taxpayers. So let's go through it. So this is the data that I compiled on these large church organizations that took PPP loans. And it's not exhaustive. It really only applies to evangelical organizations. And I did pursue the largest churches in America. I pursued a lot of the most influential seminaries and some of the more influential pastors that weren't necessarily the largest churches, but some of the more influential churches in the United States. So that's the sample that I was going for and what I was researching. So let's go through some of the big names that took PPC. And again, I don't think all these people were wrong for doing so, but Joel Osteen is taking a lot of flack for taking some of this money. He took about $4.4 million, but a lot of these other guys took it too. So this is just about transparency. After all, it's your money. So let's just look at this. So Joyce Meyer Ministries took between $5 to $10 million, 402 jobs. I didn't think it would be that large. I don't know how it is that large, but she took a lot of money. So one of the largest churches in America is Life Church with Pastor Craig Groeschel. They took between $5 to $10 million, and they got that money pretty soon on April 7th. And I believe the earliest date that I saw churches take or get approved was April 4th. So Life Church really jumped on it. And they're also an LLC, which I thought was interesting. Willow Creek, they're probably one of the organizations that took the most money because not only did Willow Creek Community Church take somewhere between $5 to $10 million, but they also have Willow Creek Association take some money as well. Awana Clubs is actually somewhere between $2 to $5 million, so we're now in the $2 to $5 million range. And again, I don't think I have an issue with Awana pursuing this money. Like, I don't think that's wrong. And a lot of state conventions are in this level as well. And the thing about state conventions is a lot of these state conventions, for example, I know Northwest Baptist Convention, they're heavily involved in church planting. And I know that they were having issues with the North American Missions Board, because there's a lot of beef between Randy Adams of Northwest and Kevin Ezel of NAM. So I don't think it's wrong for them. They're on this list, and I don't think it's wrong for them to have pursued the money, assuming that their other motivations are correct. So now we're diving into some churches. There's a lot of Southern Baptist churches and organizations on here. Southern Baptist Convention, relatively speaking, cleaned up. Well, we see Baptist, a lot of Baptist state conventions. Bayside Community Church was definitely, took $2 to $5 million with Randy Bezet as their pastor. Christ Church of the Valley, Inc. Ashley Wooldridge. Brian Toom of Crossroads Community Church, Inc. in Ohio. Stephen Furtick of Elevation Church took between $2 to $5 million because, Stephen Furtick's got to have his mansion paid for. Greg Laurie of Harvest Christian Fellowship in California took $2 to $5 million. Joel Osteen of Lakewood Church took $2 to $5 million. And if we look at, now we get into some of the seminaries. So the Southern Baptist seminaries. So 5 of the 6 Southern Baptist seminaries took PPP loans. And Southern Baptist Theological Seminary is the one left out. Now, Southern Baptist Theological Seminary could not have qualified for these loans because they fired professors during this period. So they fired Dr. Russell Fuller because Dr. Russell Fuller was against critical race theory. So that actually made them ineligible for these loans, assuming that they had, underneath 500 employees. If they had over 500, I think that was the limit for PPP loans. But in any case, they weren't qualified for these loans. So that's why the other seminaries took them on, have PPP loans, but Southern does not. So Tony Evans of Oak Cliff Bible Fellowship is on this list. Tim Keller double dips because not only does Redeemer Presbyterian Church in New York City have a PPP loan of $2 to $5 million, but so does the Gospel Coalition. And this is kind of where you start to question like the behavior of some of these organizations, because Tim Keller is perfectly fine shutting down his church and taking PPP loans, and also perfectly fine, so it seems, with the New York City Police Department going after Jewish communities. And then we got David Jeremiah of Shadow Mountain Community Church, another Southern Baptist church, $2 to $5 million. John MacArthur. So John MacArthur had the Masters University and Seminary. They were approved on August 8th, which is after it was reported that Grace Community Church, which is also on this list, received and returned the money. So that happened. This loan was approved afterwards. And again, I don't think it's... Yeah, I think a seminary, an organization that relies on churches to fund may have a greater need for this money than regular churches. We got Judah Smith of Church Home is on this list. He took $1 to $2 million. So now we're in the $1 to $2 million range. Ed Young Jr. of Fellowship Church took $1 to $2 million. This is John MacArthur. We kind of already went over him. David Dykes of Green Acres Baptist Church took $1 to $2 million. David Platt took $1 to $2 million for McLean Bible Church. And David Platt was organizing Black Lives Matter marches while not opening up his church. So, just keep that in mind. Max Lucado's church took $1 to $2 million. Chuck Swindoll's church took $1 to $2 million. David Youth's church, First Baptist Church Orlando, he was actually going to be hosting FBC 2020, but that was canceled. He took $1 to $2 million. Jonathan Falwell took $1 to $2 million. This is Willow Creek again. Then we have Randy Clark. He's a NAR-apostle for part of the New Apostolic Reformation movement. His organization took $350,000 to $1 million. Chris Hodges. So Chris Hodges' church, Church of the Highlands in Alabama, is one of the largest churches in the United States. That church did not take the money. However, Chris Hodges is the founder of the Association of Related Churches, or ARC. and Church of the Highlands in Alabama is the flagship church for that organization. They took $350,000 to $1 million. So, the largest churches in America took the money. And I don't know whether they all needed to or not, but if you look at the dates, a lot of these dates are relatively early. Most of the dates are within mid-April. So I just want to show you this chart here. So if you look at the data, majority of these loans were approved by mid-April. So not very long into lockdowns did these churches seek and approve loans. So, a lot of big names are on here. Another interesting one is the Ethics and Religious Liberty Commission. They took $300,000 to $1 million, and I don't know what they do because they don't do much over there. They took government money and then didn't do their jobs when it came to religious liberty. So, as far as people who are unethical in taking this money, Russell Moore is at the top of this list. So another more big names: Levi Lusko, John Burke, Carl Lentz, who's since been terminated from Hillsong NYC because he was having some affairs, Jim Wallace, who's the founder of Sojourners. So, more Tim Keller, John Sabling, T.D. Jakes, Rich Wilkerson Sr., Michael Miller, who's another NAR apostle, Rick Wilkerson Jr., Rich Wilkerson Jr., Mark Dever, who double dipped because not only did 9 Marks receive money, but also his church, Capitol Hill Baptist Church, is on this list as well. Bill Johnson's organizations took some money, not Bethel Redding itself, but its parachurch ministries did take some of the money. There's David Dykes actually double dipped again with 2 different organizations receiving money. Mike Todd received $150,000 to $350,000, despite the fact that their church is flooded with money right now. So that's kind of interesting. They did not need this money, but they took it anyway. So that's just a rundown on this data. This data will be available on evangelicaldarkweb.org. I will link it in the description below. These documents, I have this document, which is the stratified sample that I've pulled. And I also have the raw data from the Small Business Administration. That file has been renamed and delineated. So, because I can't just upload a zip file to WordPress. So I'm going to publish these, or these are already published, and they're for you. So check that out in the description below. My name's Ray. Like I said, I'm not trying to completely condemn all these people, but it is your money, and I'm more interested in how these churches behave after receiving this money than I am interested in whether they receive the money or not. Conspicuously absent on this list, a lot of charismatic churches were less likely to take the money than Southern Baptist organizations. Rick Warren did not take the money, and Andy Stanley didn't take the money, and both of those latter two are very heavy on the panic porn. So I just thought that was interesting. But, maybe they have more than 500 employees, so maybe they're not qualified. This is just a launching pad for a later discussion because, this is data. So it's not the whole story, but it's information, you would be interested in. So a lot of these churches are very influential, and their behavior kind of sets a tone that trickles down. And that's unfortunate, but true. So my name's Ray. This is the Evangelical Dark Web. Comment below to let me know what you think about this issue of churches taking PPP loans. I'm hopefully going to do another video on whether churches should or not. So subscribe and I'll catch you on the next one.